The morning sun cast long shadows across the corridors of Buckingham Palace as Queen Camilla made her way through the private quarters. Her footsteps echoed softly against the marble floors, a sound that had become familiar to the staff over the years since she had taken her place beside King Charles. Today felt different, though, charged with an energy that made the very walls seem to hold their breath. In the distance, she could hear the gentle murmur of voices from the blue drawing room where preparations were underway for the upcoming state dinner. The event would host dignitaries from across the Commonwealth, and every detail had been scrutinized for weeks. Camilla paused at the ornate mirror in the hallway, adjusting the pearl earrings that had belonged to the Queen Mother. These family heirlooms carried weight beyond their monetary value, each piece telling a story of the monarchy's enduring legacy. The decision to wear Diana's sapphire and diamond necklace tonight had not come easily. The stunning piece, officially known as the Saudi Sapphire Suite, had been a wedding gift to Diana from the Saudi royal family in 1981. Its deep blue sapphires caught light like captured starlight, surrounded by brilliant diamonds that seemed to dance with every movement. The necklace had become synonymous with Diana's elegance and grace, photographed countless times as she attended galas, premieres, and royal functions. Since Diana's tragic death in 1997, the jewelry had remained largely untouched, stored carefully in the royal collection. Occasionally, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had worn pieces from Diana's collection, always with great reverence and public approval. The sight of Diana's jewelry on her daughter-in-law brought comfort to many who remembered the people's princess with deep affection. But Camilla's relationship with Diana's memory remained complicated. The public had never forgotten the role she played in the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage. Though time had softened some of the harsh criticism, there were still those who viewed Camilla through the lens of those turbulent years. Every public appearance was scrutinized, every jewelry choice analyzed for its appropriateness and sensitivity. The Queen's dresser, Margaret, had suggested the necklace that morning as they reviewed options for the evening's ensemble. The deep navy gown Camilla had chosen would complement the sapphires beautifully, creating a regal appearance befitting the occasion. Margaret, who had served the royal family for over 3 decades, understood the delicate balance required in these decisions. She had dressed both Diana and now Camilla, witnessing firsthand the evolution of royal fashion and protocol. "Your Majesty, the sapphire suite would be perfect with tonight's gown," Margaret had suggested carefully, her experienced eyes assessing the combination. "The late Princess of Wales wore it so memorably, and it would honor her memory while serving the occasion beautifully." Camilla had nodded slowly, understanding the weight of the suggestion. To wear Diana's jewelry was to step into a space that required careful consideration. She thought of William and Harry, Diana's sons who had grown into men carrying their mother's legacy with them. Would they see this as an honor to their mother's memory, or would it feel like an intrusion into something sacred? The necklace itself was extraordinary, consisting of a large oval sapphire pendant surrounded by diamonds, suspended from a chain of smaller sapphires and diamonds. It had been part of a larger suite that included matching earrings and a bracelet. Diana had often worn the complete set, but sometimes chose to wear just the necklace, allowing its dramatic centerpiece to command attention. As Camilla made her way to the jewelry room, she reflected on the strange turns life had taken. Never in her younger years had she imagined she would one day be queen, making decisions about wearing the jewelry of the woman whose marriage she had inadvertently helped to destroy. The irony was not lost on her, nor was the responsibility that came with her position. The jewelry room itself was a marvel, lined with climate-controlled cases containing centuries of royal treasures. Each piece had its own story, its own significance in the long tapestry of British royal history. The crown jewels were kept separately in the Tower of London, But here lay the personal collections, the gifts from foreign dignitaries, the family heirlooms passed down through generations. Diana's collection occupied several cases, carefully catalogued and maintained. There were the Spencer family tiaras, the gifts from her charitable work, and the pieces Charles had given her during their marriage. Each item seemed to shimmer with memory, carrying echoes of the laughter, tears, and dreams of the woman who had once worn them. Camilla approached Diana's case with measured steps. The Saudi sapphire suite lay nestled in royal blue velvet, its stones catching the soft lighting of the room. She had seen photographs of Diana wearing it countless times, at state functions and charity galas, always radiant and confident. The necklace had been photographed at some of Diana's most memorable appearances, becoming almost as famous as the woman who wore it. Standing before the case, Camilla felt the weight of history pressing down upon her. This was more than just jewelry. It was a symbol of Diana's place in royal history, her contribution to the monarchy's story. To wear it would be to acknowledge that legacy while also claiming her own space within the royal narrative. The palace staff moved quietly in the background, preparing for the evening's festivities. Florists arranged elaborate displays in the staterooms, while the kitchen staff prepared a menu that would showcase British cuisine to their international guests. Every detail reflected the careful planning that went into royal entertainments, the desire to present the monarchy at its finest. But in this quiet moment, surrounded by the treasures of centuries, Camilla faced a decision that went beyond protocol and fashion. She was about to reach for something that belonged not just to royal history but to the heart of public memory. The people's princess had left an indelible mark on the consciousness of a nation, and her jewelry had become part of that legacy. The afternoon light shifted through the tall windows, casting new patterns across the jewelry cases. Time seemed suspended as Camilla contemplated the choice before her. In a few hours, she would need to be dressed and ready to receive their guests, to represent the monarchy with dignity and grace. The choice of jewelry would be noticed, photographed, and analyzed by royal watchers around the world. She thought of Charles, probably in his study reviewing his remarks for tonight's dinner. He would understand the significance of her choice, having lived through the complexities of those earlier years. His own relationship with Diana's memory had evolved over time, moving from the pain of their failed marriage to a more generous appreciation of her contributions to their sons and to the monarchy itself. The sound of approaching footsteps broke into her reverie. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral as always. She had learned long ago not to show surprise or judgment at the decisions made by the royals she served. Her role was to facilitate, to ensure that whatever choices were made could be executed flawlessly. "Your Majesty, shall I prepare the sapphire suite for this evening?" Margaret asked quietly, her voice carrying the respectful tone that marked all interactions within the palace walls. Camilla turned toward the case, her hand moving almost of its own accord toward the glass that separated her from Diana's necklace. The stones seemed to pulse with inner fire, as if they held some of the passion and warmth of the woman who had made them famous. This was the moment of decision, the point where intention would become action, where thought would transform into a choice that could not be undone. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the royal apartments as Camilla sat at her dressing table. The Saudi sapphire suite spread before her like captured starlight. Margaret worked with practiced efficiency, arranging the jewelry alongside the evening's carefully chosen accessories. The deep navy gown hung nearby, its elegant lines designed to complement rather than compete with the dramatic necklace. But something felt wrong. As Camilla lifted the necklace, feeling its substantial weight in her hands, a strange sensation washed over her. The stones, which had seemed so brilliant moments before, now felt cold against her skin. The clasp, usually smooth and cooperative, seemed to resist her attempts to fasten it. Margaret stepped forward to assist, but even her experienced hands struggled with the mechanism that had never given trouble before. "How curious," Margaret murmured, her brow furrowing slightly as she examined the clasp. "This piece has always been perfectly maintained. Perhaps the humidity has affected the metal somehow." Camilla turned to face the mirror, and what she saw made her breath catch. The necklace, which had looked so magnificent in the jewelry case, seemed somehow diminished against her neckline. The sapphires, famous for their deep blue fire, appeared dull and lifeless. Even the diamonds, known for their exceptional brilliance, seemed to have lost their sparkle. "Margaret, does the necklace look different to you?" Camilla asked, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty that was rare for her. Margaret stepped back, tilting her head as she assessed the ensemble. Her years of experience had taught her to notice even the subtlest details, and she could see what troubled the queen. "Perhaps it's the lighting, Your Majesty. The stones may appear different under these conditions." But both women knew it was more than lighting. The necklace that had once transformed Diana into a vision of royal elegance seemed to resist its new wearer. It was as if the jewelry itself remembered its previous owner and found the substitution somehow wrong. In another part of the palace, King Charles was reviewing his speech for the evening's dinner when he felt an unexpected chill. The sensation was so sudden and pronounced that he looked up from his papers toward the window, thinking perhaps a draft had entered the room. But the windows were closed, and the afternoon was warm and still. He had felt something similar only once before, years ago, in the weeks following Diana's funeral. He had been in his study at Highgrove sorting through personal effects, when a sudden sense of presence had filled the room. At the time, he had dismissed it as grief playing tricks with his mind, but the memory had never entirely faded. Now that same inexplicable sensation returned, accompanied by an image that flashed unbidden through his thoughts. Diana's sapphire necklace, the one she had worn so memorably to countless royal functions. The vision was so vivid and unexpected that Charles set down his pen and stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. Diana had loved those gardens, especially in autumn, when the leaves turned gold and crimson. She had often walked there with William and Harry when they were young, teaching them the names of flowers and encouraging them to feed the swans on the lake. Even after their separation, she would sometimes bring the boys there for visits, and Charles would watch from his window as she laughed at their antics, her own joy infectious even from a distance. The memory of her laughter seemed to echo now in the quiet of his study, accompanied by that persistent image of the sapphire necklace. Charles found himself thinking of the last time he had seen her wear it, at a state dinner much like tonight's. She had been radiant that evening, moving through the crowd with the natural grace that had made her such an effective ambassador for the monarchy. Meanwhile, in the Queen's apartments, the situation was growing more puzzling. Margaret had attempted 3 times to properly fasten the necklace, but each time something went wrong. The clasp would spring open unexpectedly, or the chain would tangle in ways that seemed to defy logic. Even when the piece was successfully secured, it would shift and slide against Camilla's neck, refusing to lie flat as it had always done for Diana. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should consider an alternative for this evening," Margaret suggested gently. She had served the royal family long enough to recognize when circumstances were pushing against their plans. The Queen Mother's pearls would be equally appropriate, and they complement your gown beautifully. But Camilla felt a stubborn resistance to abandoning her choice. She had made the decision to wear Diana's necklace after careful consideration, weighing the symbolic significance against the potential for criticism. To change course now felt like surrender, an acknowledgement that she could not claim her rightful place as Charles's queen. "No, Margaret, we'll make this work. Perhaps if we try a different approach to securing it." As they continued their attempts, other strange occurrences began to manifest throughout the palace. In the blue drawing room, where the pre-dinner reception would be held, one of the massive floral arrangements toppled over without apparent cause. The flowers, carefully chosen to complement the evening's color scheme, scattered across the antique Persian carpet in a shower of blue delphiniums and white roses. The palace staff rushed to clean up the mess, but before they could finish, a second arrangement fell, and then a third. The florists, who had been creating royal displays for decades, stood baffled as their carefully balanced creations seemed to collapse of their own accord. No vibration had disturbed them. No wind had blown through the sealed room, yet the flowers lay strewn across the floor like botanical casualties. In the kitchen, the preparation for the evening's dinner encountered its own mysterious disruptions. Sauces that had been perfectly seasoned suddenly turned bitter. Pastry that had risen beautifully in the ovens emerged flat and dense. The head chef, a man whose temperament was legendary throughout the palace, found himself shouting orders that his staff scrambled to follow, racing to recreate dishes that had inexplicably failed. "It's as if the very palace is fighting us tonight," muttered one of the sous chefs as he watched a perfectly prepared soufflé collapse before his eyes. The comment, though spoken in jest, carried an uncomfortable ring of truth. Throughout the royal residence, small but significant disruptions were accumulating. Lights flickered in the staterooms despite recently serviced electrical systems. Doors that usually opened smoothly began to stick or swing closed without warning. Even the palace's famously reliable heating system seemed to be struggling, creating pockets of unusual cold in rooms that should have been comfortably warm. Back in her apartments, Camilla continued to struggle with the recalcitrant necklace. Each attempt to wear it brought new frustrations. The chain would catch on her hair, or the pendant would twist and hang awkwardly. Most disturbing of all, the stones themselves seemed to be losing their luster with each passing minute. What had been a magnificent display of royal jewelry was becoming a dull collection of unremarkable gems. Margaret, whose professional composure rarely cracked, was beginning to show signs of distress. She had dressed royals for state occasions countless times, but nothing in her experience had prepared her for jewelry that seemed to actively resist being worn. Her hands, usually steady and sure, trembled slightly as she made yet another attempt to position the necklace correctly. "Your Majesty, I must confess I've never encountered anything quite like this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps there's something about the piece that requires special handling." Camilla caught her reflection in the mirror and was startled by what she saw. The woman looking back at her appeared somehow diminished, as if the act of trying to wear Diana's necklace was draining her own vitality. Her complexion, usually vibrant and healthy, looked pale and drawn. Even her posture seemed affected, her shoulders slumping under the weight of the problematic jewelry. For the first time since beginning this ordeal, doubt crept into her mind. Was she making a mistake in insisting on wearing Diana's necklace? Was there something about the piece that made it unsuitable for anyone but its original owner? The questions multiplied in her thoughts, each one adding to the growing sense that forces beyond her understanding were at work. The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor broke into her troubled reflections. Charles's voice could be heard speaking to someone, likely his private secretary, about the evening's arrangements. Camilla realized that time was running short. Guests would begin arriving within the hour, and she needed to be ready to receive them with dignity and grace. But as she looked at herself in the mirror, wearing a necklace that seemed determined to resist her, she wondered if grace was even possible under these circumstances. The door to the Queen's apartments opened with a soft click, and Charles entered with his characteristic measured stride. His evening dress was impeccable as always, the formal attire lending him an air of dignified authority that had only grown more pronounced since his coronation. But his expression carried a weight that went beyond the usual pre-dinner preparations. My dear, I felt I should check on your progress before—" His words trailed off as he took in the scene before him. Camilla sat at her dressing table, her reflection showing obvious distress, while Margaret stood behind her with the Saudi sapphire suite in her hands, looking more flustered than he had ever seen the usually unflappable dresser. The necklace itself was the most shocking sight of all. Charles remembered it vividly from the years of his marriage to Diana, how it had seemed to glow with inner fire against her skin, transforming her into a vision of royal magnificence. Now, held in Margaret's trembling hands, it looked like nothing more than a collection of dull stones, lifeless and somehow wrong. "Charles, thank goodness you're here," Camilla said, turning to face him with relief, evident in her voice. "We've been trying for nearly an hour to get this necklace to cooperate, but nothing seems to work. Every time we think we've managed it, something goes wrong." Charles approached slowly, his gaze fixed on the jewelry that had once adorned his first wife so memorably. As he drew closer, the temperature in the room seemed to drop noticeably, and he felt that same strange presence he had sensed earlier in his study, but stronger now, more defined. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we should consider that this particular piece might not be suitable for tonight's occasion." But even as he spoke the words, he could see the determination in Camilla's eyes. She had made her decision to wear Diana's necklace, and abandoning it now would feel like defeat. He understood her position, even sympathized with it, but something deep in his consciousness was warning him that they were treading on dangerous ground. Margaret, still holding the necklace, suddenly gasped and nearly dropped it. "Your Majesty, the stones are ice cold," she said, her voice shaking. "They're so cold they burn to touch." Charles reached out to take the necklace from her, and the moment his fingers made contact with the sapphires, a jolt of something that was not quite electricity, not quite memory, shot through him. Images flooded his mind with startling clarity. Diana laughing as she fastened the necklace for the first time. Diana wearing it to their 10th wedding anniversary celebration. Diana clutching it protectively during one of their last public appearances together. But there was something else in those flashing memories, something that made his blood run cold. In every image, Diana's eyes held a sadness that grew deeper over time, a pain that the magnificent jewelry could not disguise. The necklace had been witness to the slow dissolution of their marriage, present during some of their most difficult moments together. "Charles, what is it?" Camilla asked, alarmed by the expression on his face. Before he could answer, the lights in the room began to flicker more violently than before. The temperature continued to drop until their breath became visible in the suddenly Arctic air. Margaret backed toward the door, her professional composure finally cracking entirely. "I think," Charles said slowly, still holding the necklace, "that Diana doesn't want this piece to be worn tonight." The words hung in the air between them, too extraordinary to be easily accepted, too evidently true to be dismissed. Camilla stared at her husband, searching his face for any sign that he was joking or trying to spare her feelings. But his expression was deadly serious, and the supernatural cold in the room provided unmistakable confirmation of his statement. "You're saying that Diana's spirit is here, preventing me from wearing her necklace?" Camilla's voice carried a mixture of skepticism and growing fear. Charles set the necklace down on the dressing table with careful deliberation. The moment it left his hands, the temperature in the room began to return to normal, and the flickering lights steadied. The relief was immediate and undeniable. "I'm saying that some things are not meant to be shared, even in death," he replied quietly. Diana's connection to certain pieces of her jewelry may have transcended the physical realm. Margaret, who had been edging toward the door, suddenly stopped as a new voice joined the conversation. "She's absolutely right to be protective of it." All three turned toward the source of the voice, and there, standing in a shaft of golden light that had no earthly source, was Diana herself. She appeared exactly as she had in life, wearing the simple black dress that had been one of her favorites, her blonde hair catching highlights that seemed to come from within her very being. The apparition was not threatening or angry, but rather carried an air of gentle firmness that those who had known her would have recognized immediately. Her blue eyes, so familiar from countless photographs, held the same warmth they had shown in life, but also a new authority that spoke of hard-won wisdom. "Diana," Charles breathed, his voice barely audible. She smiled at him with genuine affection, the kind of expression that had been rare in their final years together, but which spoke of forgiveness and understanding. "Hello, Charles. Camilla." She nodded to each of them with perfect royal protocol, even in her ethereal state. "I hope you'll forgive the dramatics," Diana continued, her voice carrying that distinctive musical quality that had made her such a compelling speaker. "But that necklace holds too much of my essence to be transferred to another wearer. It would not have brought happiness to anyone involved." Camilla found her voice at last, though it trembled with emotion. "I wanted to honor your memory, to acknowledge your contribution to the monarchy." Diana's expression softened with understanding. "I know, and that intention is appreciated more than you might realize. But some honors are best given in other ways. That necklace carries not just my joy, but my pain, my struggles, my tears. It would not serve you well." She moved closer to the dressing table, her form seeming to shimmer slightly in the afternoon light. When she reached for the necklace, her translucent fingers passed through it, but somehow the jewelry responded anyway, the stones beginning to regain their familiar fire and brilliance. "This belongs with my son's wives now," she said firmly. "Catherine has worn it with grace and love. When Charlotte comes of age, perhaps it will suit her as well. But it needs to stay within the direct line of my legacy, with those who carry my blood or married those who do." Charles nodded slowly, understanding flooding his features. "We should have realized some gifts are not meant to be passed freely between families." "The monarchy has many beautiful pieces that would serve you better tonight, Camilla," Diana said, turning her attention to her husband's second wife. "Wear something that reflects your own journey, your own place in royal history. You don't need to borrow from mine." The wisdom in her words was undeniable, but Camilla struggled with the implications. "How do I know I'm doing right by the crown, by the people who expect certain standards?" Diana laughed, and the sound filled the room with unexpected joy. "Oh, my dear, if I had worried about meeting everyone's expectations, I would never have accomplished anything at all. Be yourself, be authentic, and let your actions speak for your commitment to service." She began to fade as she spoke, her form becoming more translucent with each passing moment. "Take care of each other," were her final words, directed at both Charles and Camilla. "The monarchy needs unity now, not division." And then she was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of her favorite perfume and a necklace that now blazed with restored beauty on the dressing table. The three living occupants of the room stood in stunned silence for several minutes. Margaret was the first to move, quietly selecting a different jewelry case from the collection and opening it to reveal Queen Alexandra's diamond riviere, a spectacular piece that had belonged to Edward VII's wife. "Perhaps this would suit tonight's ensemble better, Your Majesty," she suggested, her voice still shaky, but determined to return to practical matters. Camilla looked at the alternative necklace, then at Charles, who nodded encouragingly. As Margaret fastened the diamonds around her neck, they felt warm and welcoming against her skin, settling into place as if they had always belonged there. In the mirror, Camilla saw not Diana's reflection, but her own, transformed by jewelry that enhanced rather than competed with her natural dignity. The diamonds caught the light beautifully, creating a sparkle that complemented her eyes and brought out the richness of her evening gown. "Perfect," Charles said softly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Absolutely perfect." As they prepared to leave for the evening's festivities, none of them spoke about what they had witnessed. Some experiences transcend ordinary conversation, requiring instead a quiet acknowledgement that the world contains mysteries beyond human understanding. The state dinner proceeded flawlessly, with Camilla receiving numerous compliments on her appearance and jewelry choice. The diamonds seemed to enhance her natural warmth, helping her connect with guests in a way that felt genuine and unforced. Photography from the evening would later show her looking radiant and confident, truly comfortable in her role as queen. Diana's necklace remained in its case that night, but somehow it seemed more brilliant than ever, as if their supernatural encounter had restored not just its physical beauty, but its spiritual significance as well. In time, it would indeed find its way to Catherine again, and eventually to Charlotte, carrying with it not just the legacy of the people's princess, but also the understanding that some treasures are meant to stay within the families that give them meaning. The palace returned to its normal rhythms, but those who had witnessed Diana's appearance carried with them a deeper appreciation for the delicate balance between honoring the past and embracing the future. In choosing her own path rather than borrowing from Diana's, Camilla had found a way to respect both their legacies while allowing each to shine in their own distinctive light.